So we're back then with an updated version of my beginner's guide to everything you need to know for Marvel's Avengers. This guide I initially done around about 6 months or so ago. Since then we've had the War for Wakanda update, and I've actually created quite a few new infographics as well. So we're going to go in and we're going to do an updated version today. Now what will we be covering? So we start off in the video talking about stats. You need to understand these before you can even think about starting to build your hero. Next up, we'll discuss the status and battery effect and how important that is. We have currencies next, so that'll be what to farm and where to spend them on. We then have a level 1 to 50 XP farming guide. We have another farming guide next, but this one is the ultimate farming guide and it's all about farming currencies and loot. We then have 3 essential tips for building heroes. Moving on from that, we move more into gear. So this is the best perks and where to find them on your gear. Major artifacts and who to use them on is next, and then we have the new champion system. This wasn't included in the previous video. So for the champion system, we'll talk about where you want to spend your points and the best way to actually farm them. And then finishing up, we have a brand new infographic as exotic and legendary set locations. So that's everything we will be covering. If the video is helpful, please do take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button. And let's now jump in and we'll start off with the stats first. With most of these sections then, I've actually created infographics just so we can see everything on one screen. All the infographics are available on my Discord as well if you want more high-res versions of them. But to run over the stats, we have 7 in total. So you get Might first. This increases the damage of melee attacks. It's not subject to diminishing returns, so on a melee character you want to actually stack this as high as you can. There's no point it will start to tail off and you'll get less damage. Stack it as much as you can. They then move on to precision, which is essentially just the ranged version of Might in a way. So this one here, once again, it's not subject to diminishing returns. On your ranged characters, stack it as high as you can. Proficiency is up next. This is a really important stat. So this one increases your crit chance and your perk chance %. You're mainly going for this for the crit chance increase, but increasing the chance of your perks is nice as well. They're both affected by low diminishing returns. Personally, I stop around about 160 or so, and that'll give me a 24% bonus to my crit rate. And then you've got your damage buff we'll talk about later on in the video, which can pull you way up. Your damage buff gives you 35%. So if you have 160 proficiency, you have your damage buff, you'll be looking at round about 60% crit chance, which is really pretty decent. We have Valor up next here. This one, incredibly important stat if you have a high crit rate on your character or if you're looking to run a heroic based build. So this one increases heroic effectiveness, that's essentially the damage your heroics do, and crit damage, not subject to diminishing returns. So once again you can stack this as high as you want. It scales at a rate of 1 to 5.3 for heroics and 2 to 1% for crit damage. The reason I'm reading that out is when we get to the end of this section is something that's very much relevant for how it scales on a specific character. Now we have defensive stats next here, so we've got Resolve. This one increases your max willpower, which is your health, and also your willpower recovery, not subject to diminishing returns. It scales at a rate of 1 to 43 for willpower and 1 to 1% for recovery. Now this scales so much better than the next stat, so if you're looking to get some survivability in your build, you go for Resolve over the next stat, which is actually Resilience. So this one here increases your armor %, so that's your damage reduction. It's affected by low diminishing returns. Personally, I stop at round about 70 or so Resilience, and that'll give me a pretty decent 24% armor there. On to intensity. This one here, it increases your stun status meter damage and your status resistance %. It doesn't increase the actual damage that your status moves do, it just increases how quickly the bar fills up on them, so it's not that useful a stat, to be honest. This one is affected by very high diminishing returns, so you'll stop at around about 40 intensity for 43% status meter damage, so you'll get that on essentially one piece, and that'll be just about as much as you want to stack for it. Now some additional notes here. So I mentioned earlier on about Valor, so the scaling for heroic effectiveness on 4 is actually 1 to 16.3 as opposed to 1 to 5.3. That's how 4 is able to hit ratings around about 20-30,000 Valor. You can get that high due to how it actually scales, and that's why when you're playing 4 you most likely want to do a Valor based build. Next up, I've touched on this already, so for survivability, resolve scales much better on resilience. The best way to increase your crit rate is via the damage buff, again touched on that already to an extent, and then huge shout out to the science lab for their help with the breaking down of the stats. So next up, let's talk about the status and battery effect. So heroes currently have access to up to 8 different status effects in the game. Not all heroes can actually get all status effects. Now when you combine a warm and a cold status effect, and we'll cover that once we get to the end of this section, but when you combine a warm and cold status effect, you'll double the damage you're actually doing. So this, along with the damage buff, is something that's essential for building your characters. You can't neglect this if you're looking to put out high damage numbers. Now to quickly run over each of the different types, we've got the 6 at the top. These were the ones that were in the base game. So you've got Cosmic, this one is essentially life and hit when you apply it. We have Plasma, which adds a burn that will actually spread on enemies. This is great for proccing your Berserker buff on your slot 4, the bottom perk down where 16 hits without taking any damage can give you a buff, and you can proc it really quick using Plasma. We then have Pim. You'll shrink the enemy. It means you, in some instances, you can actually just pick them up like your Exos and so on and just throw them out the map, so it's pretty amazing. The tooltip for this does say that enemies take more damage from all attacks with it, but that's not actually the case. Now we then have Shock. This one's really nice, so when enemies take enough shock damage they become shocked and they'll take increased damage from incoming attacks and a greater chance you can actually crit on them. Gamma's next, quite similar to Plasma in a way in that it's a dot and this can also spread. And then you have Cryo, which personally I think is fantastic. You'll freeze enemies, you'll slow them down. It does say it decreases the frequency of all actions and inhibits many defensive abilities altogether. Not quite sure what that means, but it slows enemies way down. I really do like this one. Now we have the 2 brand new ones which came with the Wakanda update, so I'll read out the full tooltip. So we've got Vibranium, which is a hot status effect. If an enemy takes enough Vibranium damage, they become overcharged, turning all damage dealt to affected enemies into a large kinetic explosion that can hit other enemies and set off chain reactions. Doesn't do a lot of damage, this one, unfortunately. I've done a fair amount of testing with it and the damage numbers are really pretty low. I'd much prefer to apply Plasma, to be honest, if I'm looking for a hot status effect over Vibranium. The cold one that was introduced with Wakanda is Sonic. So if an enemy takes enough Sonic damage to become mobile recharge stations, as long as heroes are near affected targets, they will regenerate a portion of their heroic and intrinsic meters. This one's absolutely great on your melee characters that are maybe running a build that's all about intrinsic energy or heroic energy, so it can be great for Captain America, Black Panther and Hulk, for example. Now on to the battery effect and how you get that all important double damage. So Cosmic, Plasma, Pim and Vibranium are all warm status effects. Shock, Gamma, Cryo and Sonic are all cold status effects. Attacking an enemy with the opposite status effect type, so that would be warm or cold, that they are currently suffering from will double your damage. So as mentioned, this is something you can't overlook. Many characters will have inherent status in their kit via their heroics. So the first thing you want to do when building a hero is go into their kit, check out their abilities, see if they've got some kind of inherent status. If they do, look for the opposite status as part of your gear, and that's how you get your battery effect. Now, next section will be currencies. For the currencies, and I noted down where you actually get them and what you use them for. Now the 5 currencies on the left, there's nothing that interesting about them. You can get them just about anywhere in the game and you use them to upgrade your gear. So we're going to jump straight onto the right hand side here. You've got units first. The location for these, it's leveling faction vendors and strong boxes. This is used to purchase non-marketplace cosmetics. Cosmetic vendor in the game has had nothing to sell for the past 5 months or so, but supposedly we are getting a cosmetic rework at some point in the future when this will hopefully become useful again. Polycoron is next, exceptionally important, probably the most important one. So this one, you get it from your daily faction missions and your high level elites as a random chance it will drop from them. This is used to upgrade your major artifacts. Later on in the video I'll run over all the major artifacts and who you want to use them on. We have Urus next, come from strong boxes and gear vendors, used to upgrade your minor artifacts. We then have upgrade modules. This is another really important one, probably up there with the polycorons. You get this from your elite vaults, hives and villain sectors. You can get it from faction vendors and also your mega hive. This will upgrade your gear past level 130, so if you want to hit 150 in your gear, this is what you'll actually be spending. So yeah, really important. And then finally we have DNA keys. So these, you get them for your daily faction, boss quest and villain sectors. They're used to open DNA chests and vaults. The DNA chests are pretty underwhelming, but you can get Jarvis barrier gear that drops in them. So if you're looking for Jarvis barrier and you don't want to run the Last Avengers standing, which is where you normally get it, you can just go into the Snowy Tundra and just open some chests instead. But that's the currencies. Let's now talk about the level 1 to 50 XP farming guide. When it comes to leveling your hero to level 50, there seems to be two schools of thought with this. One of them is you just focus purely on XP and then you go for gear afterwards. The other one, and the one that I actually prefer myself, is that you actually focus on both XP and gear at the same time, because you will eventually need to get your gear on your character anyway. So what I personally like to do, you've got the Day of the Remains mission. I would go into that. It's a pretty quick mission to finish. There's various different checkpoints that reward you with XP, and there's a fair amount of chests that are on the route as well for it. So what I do with this, I don't go in and I don't pick up every chest, because I'm not using this for gear farming. I'm using it for gear and XP farming. So what I do is I take the most optimal route through it, trying to finish it as quickly as I can, picking up chests that are on the way through the level as well. So what I'll actually do with this, I've sped up the gameplay here, but I'll put a timestamp. If you've seen this before and you know about the Day of the Remains, I'll put a timestamp on screen now for the next section, and the next section will actually be the ultimate farming guide. So when it comes to farming your gear, your comic books, your units, your upgrade modules, your crafting materials, there's one universally agreed place that you would actually do that. It is the Snowy Tundra Vault. Now, similar to the last section, I've got a run here that I've actually sped up. With the Snowy Tundra Vault, that you'll be able to get 23 chests in round about 8 minutes or so. With this as well, some of the chests will actually slightly move about in location. They can be in one of 3 different places. So with the run I'm showing off in the background, if I throw out the shield in Captain America, that means an alternative location of where the chest could actually spawn. But I've sped this up once again, but what I'll do, if you're familiar with this run, we'll have another timestamp on screen so we can jump to the next section. The next section will be 3 essential tips for building heroes. So we'll run over 3 elements here that I would say are absolutely vital to building your hero. You can't afford to overlook these on any hero. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a gear piece on Hawkeye that actually has all of those elements, which is pretty amazing. So we start off with the first perk key at the top, the targeted buff. The reason we're looking at that, it's got the damage buff. So what is a damage buff? This will give you 35% crit when it's active. That's flat crit, not subject to diminishing returns. And it gives you 60% damage increase. It's not additive, it actually multiplies your base damage, which is absolutely incredible. We've then got the second perk here. This is great to showcase the battery effect. So we talked earlier on in the video about how you want to use your heroics to proc one status effect, and then you use your attacks within your kit to actually proc the other status effect. So in this instance on Hawkeye, his ultimate heroic can proc the shock status effect, which is cold. I'll follow up with these arrows here, meaning I'll be doing double damage on them. Finally here we have the Tachyon Surge. This is another amazing effect that you really want to be looking for in your kit. With this one here, you can see that Surge increases all status damage by 50% while active. You'll always want to be doing status attacks on your characters when you can, and this additional 50%, once again, it's not additive, it works as a multiplier. So that's 3 elements that are absolutely vital to building your hero. Always take these into account when you're actually trying to set up your character. Now, next up, slightly related to this, we're actually going to talk about the best perks available in characters and where you can find them. So with this section here, there's actually a fair amount of information. I'm not going to read it out. What I'm going to do is explain the purpose of this infographic, and if you have any questions about it, let me know in the comments below. But we've got your 4 different slots here now. All the perks that we have listed are the best perks that you actually want to look out for, and certain perks can only roll in certain perk slots. So your legendary items will have 3 perk slots, but there are only certain perks that can roll in a particular slot. So just to give you one example of this, if we look at the defense slot, that's actually the easiest. So your top perk on your defense slot, the perk that you want to look out for when the gear drops, is that a chance taking damage grants either your damage buff, your defense buff, or your intrinsic burst. They're all really useful ones you can get there. I've also noted on this location of certain perks only drop on certain gear from particular locations. So if we look one more down on the defense section, you can see there's a chance taking damage grants Jarvis barrier, which is fantastic on a defensive piece. This would be your perk slot number 1. It only comes from your DNA chest and your last Avenger standing as well. Now the whole idea about actually breaking this down is when you're going through your gear, it can take a lot of time to actually recognise what gear is actually worth keeping, but once you get all these different perks burned into your mind and where they actually drop, you can look at a gear piece and straight away you can know, do I keep this or do I actually destroy it? So going back once again to the defense slot, looking at the good perks that are available on it, there's really not a lot available at all. So the first thing you really do when you look at a defense slot, see if it has the stats you're looking for. If it does, quickly look down to perk slot number 1, look for your chance taking damage will grant your damage buff, defense buff, intrinsic burst. If it isn't there, then it's not worth keeping that item and you want to destroy it. And the same applies for the other perks we've got listed for the other different sections as well, your melee, your ranged and your heroic. I hope that all makes sense anyway. If you do have any questions about this particular section, do let me know and I will get back to you. But next up, we're going to talk about major artifacts and who to use them on. So these major artifacts will be unlocked as you play through the campaign and play through the additional story DLC as well. Now you upgrade them via polycorons, which are time gated, so you need to be really careful in regards to which major artifact you actually upgrade. The upgrades on them are not account wide, they're actually hero specific. So if you upgrade the Tactagon on Hawkeye and then you changed over to Hulk, his Tactagon would be at level 1, so you need to bear that in mind there. But let's run through them here. We have the Tactagon first, so this one increases your status damage and damage to enemies affected by status. It offers a negligible amount of might and valour, offers 10 of each, so you're not really taking it for the stat at all. The third perk is exceptionally underwhelming, I just don't use it at all. It's great for sustained damage on heroes with built-in status, so that would be, for example, your Iron Man, your Hulk, Thor, Black Widow and also Hawkeye. We then have the Ring of Nibelung next, possibly the most commonly used one. This is incredible. This one here increases the amount of all your orbs restore. That could be your heroic orbs or your intrinsic orbs. But as well, alongside this, the amount restored is much higher than the tooltip actually suggests. The third perk can be useful, but it's not really essential on it. It's great on heroes with powerful heroics and high takedown rate, because if you do a takedown you can have your character spec so a heroic orb actually appears, and then that can power up your heroics. So you can use this on the likes of Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Miss Marvel, Black Widow. It would be a melee Black Widow that you would use this on due to all the takedowns she's able to do. But absolutely incredible artifact, possibly my favourite one. We have the Nornstone of Lethal Will next. This is great if you want to show off a very quick clip of melting a boss on Reddit, because you can use this alongside the damage buff to actually have 2 damage buffs running at the same time, just for a short period though. So this one increases your crit chance when damage boost is active. It increases the duration of damage buffs by 4 seconds. The third perk is incredible because this stacks with the damage buff on your gear. Great for burst damage, and there we go, it allows heroes to hit up to 100% crit, which is pretty amazing, and you use on all your heroes when you're farming bosses, and once again if you want to show off on Reddit. We then have the Void Tech Transponder. This came from the Clint DLC, The Future Imperfect. So this one increases PIM status damage by 30%, or at least it should. It doesn't, it's been bugged since launch, I have reported it. It increases PIM status effects duration, which is pretty nice so enemies stay shrunk for longer, and the third perk allows you to summon Hank Pym, which is pretty awesome. Now with this you're able to apply full PIM status on one shot to enemies including bosses from Hank Pym, which is really pretty incredible. You would use this on heroes who use the PIM status as your primary main attack. Until it's fixed though, I wouldn't actually recommend upgrading this one at all. We have the Darkhold next. With this, you use it below 50% willpower to restore all health. You use when over 50% health in heroics to charge your refresh rate of your heroics, and the third perk is next to useless compared to the others. This is really a pretty niche item, but you can get some fun build options on this. You use it in Iron Man, for example. You could have 2 Hulkbusters out at the same time, or you could use it in 4 for some burst damage. I personally can't really recommend it though, other than the fact, as mentioned, you can have some niche fun builds like the double Hulkbuster. We have the Vishanti Appendix next. This one came with the Kate DLC. So this one increases your health recovery while invisible, so the only character that's really going to be using that is Black Widow. Also with this is a % chance crit melee attacks when invisible extend duration by 1 second. The third perk provides invisibility for 10 seconds. Once again, very niche item, but offers a unique high skill level playstyle. That would be on melee Black Widow, helps you sustain invisibility on her. We have the Nornstone of Obsidian Spirit next. The first perk on this particular one, it will only boost health and not armour due to your armour cap being 60%. It increases the duration of defense buffs by 4 seconds. The third perk is a health boost. It's very underwhelming. I would say it's the worst artifact in the game. I would only really use it, let's say you want to build the most tankiest Captain America or Hulk for example, then you would use it for that, but other than that I can't recommend it at all. And then finally we have the latest artifact that came out with the Marvel Wakanda expansion. So this particular one increases Vibranium status damage by 30%. It's also bugged. It's very similar to the Void Tech Transponder and how it works. So it looks like they've copy and pasted it over in a way because it's bugged and you don't get the increase in damage for now. It says as well it increases the radius damage of Vibranium explosion by 20%. Could be useful if you're running a Vibranium build. And the third perk allows you to summon Okoye. Now the AI of Okoye is very erratic. I've seen her run into walls and not fight enemies, and the damage is really low. She's not a patch on the Hank Pym summon who can, with enemies a while back, Hank Pym summon could actually one-shot the Monica boss fight. That's now been patched, but you could actually do that. Okoye is really underwhelming. For this I would say using Black Panther or potentially Cap if you want to run a Vibranium style build, or you're going for a bit of role playing there because it is a Vibranium style artifact. But that's all the major artifacts and who to use them on. Let's now talk about the champion system and where to spend your points. So the champion system is where you actually invest any XP once you hit level 50 in a character. If you played Diablo, for example, it's actually very similar to that. Now, you've got 4 different trees here, so what I've actually done, I've used a star rating system to actually rate each of the different trees to let you know if it's worth investing in each of them. So let's run through them here. The first one we have is a combat tree. You can see each of the 3 different bonuses here, which sound decent on paper, are actually all only 1 star. Now the reason for that is that the 15% you see here is an additive 15%, it's not a multiplier, the same way the damage buff and tachyon surge is. So with heroes in the game, they actually have roughly 1000% base damage. So when the damage buff kicks in, it's a 60% multiplier, offering you 600% damage. These buffs are only additive, meaning your base is 1000%. This is only adding on 15%, so it actually works out. The damage increase you'll see on screen if you max out any of these ones is actually going to be around about 1.5% instead of 15%, so don't invest in these at all. You then got the tactical tree. We've got some nice options here. You've got crit damage goes up to 25%. The way this scales, it scales much better than the combat tree, so I would recommend this one. Crit chance is absolutely fantastic, of course, as long as you're not already capped out in crit chance. Some characters are able to cap out at 100%. This is a flat 5%, not subject to diminishing returns, so highly recommend this. You've got stun and status damage. This is just an increase in how quickly the bars build up. It's not an increase in actual damage, so I can't recommend this one at all. Moving on to the utility tree, we have another fantastic one. Heroic charge rate of 12.5%. That's across all your heroics. This is absolutely fantastic. So you make a beeline for this alongside the crit chance. We then have a perk chance increase. It doesn't work out at a flat 15% increase. It has to interact with the gear first, meaning it's much lower, so that's why this is 3 stars. So it's worthwhile eventually going for, but you certainly don't want to have this being one of the first ones you go for. Status resistance is up next, 10% status resistance. It's really impossible to test this in game to see if it's even working. So this one's only 1 star. We have maximum willpower. It says 20%, which sounds fantastic, but it's 20% of your base willpower you actually get at level 1. So I can't remember the exact amount, but it works out as something like it would be an extra 240 willpower it'll add on, which is pretty pathetic, to be honest. So you don't want to upgrade this. If it's ever changed to be a 20% multiplier of your maximum, then it'll be incredible, but for now don't invest in this. You then have fortification. This one's decent. This will give you your defense rating going up by an extra flat % there, so each point you put in it is 1 additional % less damage you'll actually take. And then willpower recovery, which is pretty garbage as well. So the system unfortunately does need a bit of a rework, and it needs to be much clearer how it actually explains the nodes actually work. But the ones you want to look out for in the champion system is your crit chance and your heroic charge rate. Now let me actually talk about where you can go to farm your champion points. When it comes to farming your champion levels, then there's one particular stage you can do, and it's really head and shoulders above anything else. With this, you can farm around about 190,000 champion XP per hour. That's without any kind of buffs active. The mission in question is within the Northern Expanse region. It's the Up From The Depths. That's the Black Widow iconic mission. You will need to finish the story before this does actually appear, but this is the mission. Let me show you what you want to do when you actually go into it. So there's 2 stages to farming the XP here. The first one is actually completing the first initial checkpoint, and then you're reloading the checkpoint. Now the initial checkpoint is actually the adaptoid you can see on screen at the moment. You want to get in with a burst damage build. Take them out as quick as you can. There are some drones it can provide invulnerability, so you want to take them out as well if they're nearby. You can see on screen here the elevator actually flash green there. Now when that happens, you'll get a visual clue to let you know you've completed that first part of the level as well. But when that happens, you must very quickly hit your start button and then reload from checkpoint. So what that does is it will give you the XP for completing this part of the mission, but it will allow you to restart at the beginning of the level. And then you can see it's just a case of going through. There we go. Once again, we'll hit the start button, we'll reload, and then you just repeat that. It is pretty boring, to be honest, but if you're looking to farm your champion XP levels, it's by far the best way to actually do it. So that's the champion XP system covered. Let's now talk about the exotic and legendary set locations. Finishing up here then, I'll just quickly run over that exotic and legendary set locations. Now I will say that a perfectly rolled legendary that you'll get from the snowy tundra will, the majority of the times, actually be better than your exotic and legendary sets. And the exotic and legendary sets, if you actually want to see what they are for each hero, I have all the infographics for every single hero and every single set in my Discord. There's a link to the Discord in the description below. But let's just run over these different sets and where you get them. So you've got your legendary set number 1. This comes from your elite vaults. It's a guaranteed drop at the end of the vault, but the vault key needs to be farmed for repeated runs of this. You get the vault key from the Day of the Remains mission in one of the chests that's in the vault within that stage. Legendary set number 2, available in elite villain sectors. It's a guaranteed drop, can only be ran twice a day as your daily faction missions. That's when you get your boss fights that you go up against each day. Legendary set number 3, available in elite hives. It's a guaranteed drop, there's no limit on how many times you can run this. Out of the 3 legendary sets, this is generally the strongest one, but it's the one that takes the longest time to actually run, but you can farm it as much as you want, which can be nice. We then move on to the exotic sets. We have exotic set number 1, so available in elite heroic hive. That's your 14th floor hive, also known as Last Avenger Standing. Really low drop rate, but there's no limit on how many times you can run this. It does take around about an hour or so to actually run it. Exotic set number 2, this is available in your priority missions. This is genuinely the more powerful exotic set. This one is a guaranteed exotic, but it is only once a week after reset you can actually run this. You've then got your Storm Gear. It's available in Tachyon missions and Beating the Odds. Storm Gear can have your Tachyon buff on it, so it can be really nice. This one, rewards are higher for both on first completion after your daily or your weekly reset. Your Tachyon rifts reset daily. You're Beating the Odds, which is a Monica boss fight, that resets weekly. You've then got your Hivemind gear. That's available in the Mega Hive, so that's 4 times 5 floors, and it's a guaranteed 2 exotics once a week for this. And then finishing up, the most recent gear added to the game, gear that's not worth farming at all, is your Omega gear. That's available in the Omega level threat family reunion. You go up against the Super Adaptoid, and that's a guaranteed 2 exotics once a week after resetting. Once again, if you want to see what the legendary and exotic sets actually are for your hero, to know if they're worth farming, check out my Discord, and I've got all the infographics for them there. But with that, that is everything you need to know for Marvel's Avengers. If the video has been helpful, please do take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button. Leave a comment below. Leaving comments is exceptionally important. It helps drive engagement, and then YouTube recommends the video more as well. So it really is pretty important. But thanks for tuning in for this one. Stay safe. I'll see you all again soon.